am Jacob Del Rio at the Edwardsville Public Library. I am privileged to have the Lovejoy Library people invite me to participate with this event. Lovejoy Library is on campus at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. I'm very quick to say SIUE since I'm an alum. I am joined with a fellow alum and an employee at Lovejoy Library. Allie, I'll turn it over to you in a second, but I want to mention that today, at least where we are in Edwardsville, Illinois, Midwestern United States, it's March 16th still, which is the release date of the paperback edition of The Mountain Sing here in North America on Algonquin Books. And you can get your copy of the paperback edition and the hardcover edition through Afterwards Used Books or Afterwards Books in Edwardsville, Illinois. There are links on our Facebook page for that. And I should also say that Algonquin Books has sent signed book plates to put into your copy of the book so that the author has written her, not inscription per se, but you signed it, and then you can put that in your copy that you get through Afterwards Books. So I'll turn it over to Allie Barrows, who is a colleague of mine and just a wonderful person to work with. So Allie at Lovejoy Library, I'll let you introduce our author.
Okay. Hello, I'm Allie Barrows. I work at Southern Illinois University in Lovejoy Library. I've been working there about a year now. So we are introducing Dr. Quế Mai today, and she is a Vietnamese poet and author. With her novel The Mountain Sing garnering international recognition and praise throughout every country that has been published in thus far. Born in the north of Vietnam in 1973, Quế Mai moved as a child with her family to the south of Vietnam, eventually traveling to Australia to attend university. Upon her return to Vietnam, Quế Mai worked for several international organizations, including UN agencies, to foster Vietnam's sustainable development. With a PhD in creative writing from Lancaster University in the UK, Quế Mai put her background and professionalism in writing to humanitarian interests and uses, running creative writing workshops for African refugees while based in Jakarta, Indonesia. Quế Mai works to keep peace, equality, and being communally aware as subjects in the forefront of her own creative works. The Mountain Sing is Quế Mai's first novel written first entirely in English. Featured in Oprah Magazine, April 2020, 14 of the best books to read this April, the Washington Post 2020's 10 books to read in March, and the New York Times review of the novel stating that Quế Mai contains her saga with a poet's discipline and uplifts it with a poet's antenna for beauty in the most desolate circumstances. Quế Mai's novel is a touching family saga that spans many generations and stories, with love being at the center of it all. If there is an ethos for Quế Mai's literary works, it is well summed up with the Los Angeles Review of Books appraisal of Quế Mai's book of poetry, The Secrets of How Sin. Quế Mai chooses to complement the gritty with the beautiful. The SAE Alumni Association, Lovejoy Library, and Edwardsville Public Library are honored and excited to have Dr. Quế Mai speak with us today on the day her novel, The Mountain Sing, is released in paperback. We look forward to hearing from such a talented author on such a stunning, beautiful, and intricate novel as The Mountain Sing. Thank you. And thank you very much for just being here, Quế Mai. I'm very excited to have you. So we all are. So
thank you so much, Jacob, Ali, and everyone. So many people have worked so hard to put together this event, and I'm really grateful. It is my great honor to celebrate the launch of the Mountain Sing paperback today with you. I mean, the last year has been unbelievable for me. You know, first of all, my book tour was canceled, so I was devastated. But, you know, thanks to librarians like you, thanks to readers like you, I'm here today. So thank you very much.
So actually, if that's okay, we were going to invite you to do a little bit of a reading from The Mountain Sing. And we were just happy to have you read a little bit from it, like a favorite part or something like that. So
thank you. The novel is told in the voices of Grandma Lan and her granddaughter Hương. And I'm going to read a little bit from Hương voice, who is in Hanoi in 1972 during the Vietnam War, and who's longing for the return of her parents. I miss my parents dearly. During the years that she was gone, I imagined seeing my mother again every day. I imagined disappearing into her embrace, into the river of her hair, into her soft breast. I imagined our voices rising like kites from under the shade of our new palm tree. I missed how my mother had filled our home with her singing voice, how gracefully she had danced, how she led me along by my fingers, twirling me around so my shirt would flare. Whenever I was sad, I told myself to be strong like my mother. She never cried or showed fear. Once we found a snake under our bed, and while I stood there shaking, she bent and picked it up by the tip of its tail, flinging it out of the open window. By the beginning of 1975, rumors spread that the war was really ending. And I imagined my mother flying me down the streets of Hanoi on the back of grandma's bicycle. We could scream at the top of our lungs as the bike rushed us into a brilliant summer, into red fruit flowers, into purple bang lang petals that blossomed above pavements punctured by bomb shelters. We would stop at the leg of the returned sword, delighting in the delirious coldness of Changtian ice cream. In my dreams, my mother always returned with my father. He was tall and handsome. Sometimes he would rush towards me on his 2 feet. Sometimes he struggled on a single leg, leaning on a crutch. Sometimes he embraced me in his 2 strong arms, and other times he had no arms at all, just 2 lumps of soft flesh protruding from his shoulders. But he always laughed as he called my name. Here is Hương, my daughter.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Yeah, that was beautiful. Quei Mai. So I know might not everybody might not know this about you, but you are also a poet. What made you want to write a novel, go from poetry to writing a novel? And also, what suggestions do you have for people who are thinking about writing, whether poetry or any other writing form?
You know, the great Vietnamese poet Phùng Quán says, có những phút ngã lòng tôi viện câu thơ và đứng dậy. During the moments of difficulty, I hold on to the verse of poetry to pull myself up. So poetry is really the pillar of the Vietnamese life. I mean, I grew up, listening to poetry via my mother's lullaby in the public radio broadcast. Every day we had poetry reading on our national radio, believe it or not. So, many people in Vietnam write poetry as a hobby. So, I learned so much, through poetry, the power of language and how I could use language to move others. So poetry, but I was, with my poetry, I always wanted to write about the normal people of Vietnam. So my poetry is about, street sellers, garbage collectors, rice farmers. And so I was writing poetry for a while, and I felt I needed to write a big poem, a novel, that I would sneak poetry into it, because I was thinking, not many people read poetry nowadays. So a novel is a way to invite more people into enjoying poetry via storytelling. So so for anyone who would like to write poetry or fiction or novel, my advice is that write something that that you feel important to you, that is compelling to you. You know, don't think about the readers or whether you can sell it, because if it's compelling to you and if it's important to you, your emotions will be transferred to the reader. So yeah, and especially in writing a novel, you know, it took me 7 years to write and edit this novel. So I had to read it like hundreds of times. So I had to like the story, you know, otherwise I would be miserable, you know, 7 years of being alone with the pages. So you need to feel somehow that this story needs to be told, that this is something you want to do for the sake of the art or for the sake of getting to know yourself. Yeah, so I've been really lucky that I've got a fantastic, you know, publisher, Edwardsville Book, and their team has done so much for this book.
That's so when you mentioned with poetry and how like looking within to find yourself and your voice, that's extremely important in writing, and a lot of people forget that when they want to be like, I have to publish, I have to change things, but which isn't necessarily true. But yeah. So Jacob, did you have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, well, this kind of piggybacks on that one. I know it sounded like you chose a novel as a greater form of outreach, maybe to a larger audience, but from the outset, was the scope always going to be a novel of the length of The Mountain Sing? And I guess I'm also interested to know, what was the first kernel or the first image or scene that might have set you on this journey to write The Mountain Sing?
So, you know, I was born in North Vietnam. And spent the first few years of my life in the north of Vietnam. And I remember my village was emptied of men, you know, men who had gone to war and didn't come back. So I was surrounded by women who were waiting for the return of their loved ones. And when my family moved to south of Vietnam, once again, I saw these women waiting, women whose husband didn't return from the war, or whose husbands fought alongside Americans and were put into re-education camps. So, you know, I was surrounded by incredible women, and I wanted to tell these stories. And I wanted to use a family to represent Vietnam, and how Vietnam was divided by these different historical events. So I wanted to write, you know, an epic novel through women, through the voices of women, right? But I didn't know how to open the door into that world until one day when I was in Manila, the Philippines, when I was traveling to a self-defense class, kickboxing job self-defense. I wrote about it in The Mountain Sing. So that's you know, my real experience with self-defense. So I was traveling in a car with a Vietnamese friend. So I asked him where he was during the war and if he could remember anything. And he told me about the bombing of Hanoi in 1972 and how his grandma had protected him from the bombs. And then his story was so unbelievable to me that I was like, you know, because he's very calm and he's a practiced Buddhist and he's so calm and kind. But he told me, you know, more than 20 years after the bombing, he was sent on a business trip for the first time, you know, and he had to go on an airplane. And the engine of the airplane, you know, brought him back right away to the bombing scenes and how he nearly died from American bombs. So he was screaming, he had to be taken out of the airplane. And I realized that a lot of trauma experienced by Vietnamese people is still buried. So that night when I came home, I Googled, you know, the bombing of Hanoi in 1972. And you know, if you Google, you can still hear the sirens. You see the so many images of, you know, like of houses being flattened, of people dead, even like my hospital, you know, was bombed and patients died. So I saw those images and I was so moved, and I wrote 2,000 words that night. That would become the first chapter of The Mountain Sing.
That's great. I think Allie, well, that's a wonderful um, answer. Thank you, Quay Mai. Allie, did you want to go on to our next question?
So, sort of a follow-up question to that, Koyamai, is that so the mountains sing. Was this a was it a really healing experience for you with your writing, writing this novel?
I think writing about trauma is never easy, and especially some of the experiences, that the characters, Grandma Diệu Lan and Hương went through, represent some experiences of my family members. For example, my grandma was killed in the Great Hunger of 1945, where 2 million Vietnamese died under the French and the Japanese occupation. And, we lost 3 family members because of the Great Hunger: my father's mother, her youngest son, and her brother. So writing about it was really, really painful for me. And but I think the thing about trauma is that if you communalize it, you know that you are not alone, and that there's a community out there who have gone through the same thing, and who can embrace you and and support you. So yes, it has been healing to hear the response of so many readers and who told me similar stories about their family. So, but within the Vietnamese community, there are still many struggles that we have to face. How we need to reconcile with each other. For example, the Vietnam War, for example, were fought by Vietnamese against Vietnamese. There were family members who fought against each other during that war, as I wrote in The Mountain Sing. So reconciliation and forgiveness is difficult, but it's so necessary. Otherwise, the trauma is inherited in the younger generations.
Yeah. So, sorry, Jacob, go ahead. You.
No, I mean, I think we can be a little more organic. We have a very structured system where Allie and I go back and forth with questions. I think the theme of forgiveness is such a big thing here, and I think it's great that you touched on that. I might ask you again after the rest of the questions to talk more about forgiveness. Allie, did you have a follow-up you wanted with that question?
No, you go ahead.
So I guess just for my response, one of the things I got a kick out of the most, that I enjoyed the most, was the presence of the Proverbs in this story. They are at times, they're always profound. They're always very concise. At times they're humorous. I was wondering, were they always a part of the story? Did you sprinkle them later in the process and during the 7 years? And did you have Proverbs that didn't quite make the cut that you still like to keep somewhere perhaps on your refrigerator or something?
Thank you. I mean, Proverbs are a part of our daily life in Vietnam. I grew up being surrounded by Proverbs. For example, if I had a really bad day and came home unhappy, and my mom would say, trong cây rủi có cây may. Good luck hides inside bad luck. And, and I would immediately feel better, good luck hides inside bad luck. And when I was growing up, my 2 brothers and I, we were very naughty. And if my father lost his patience, my mom would say, mưa dầm thấm lâu, soft and persistent rain penetrates the earth better than a storm, So then my father would be, okay, yeah, be patient with them. So, I mean, when I wrote The Mountain Sing, because I wrote it with a mindset that I wanted it to be an authentic Vietnamese story. So that's why I wanted to bring in the proverbs that came to my mind as I wrote the novel. And I mean, there are so many Vietnamese proverbs. I have 3 books of proverbs on my bookshelf, you know, and they're all about proverbs and their meaning and their origin. So it's really a lot of fun. There are proverbs that I'm bringing into my second novel, which I'm writing at the moment. I love this proverb. Đi với bụt mặc áo cà sa, đi với ma mặc áo giấy. It means when you are with Buddha, wear Buddhist robes. When you are with ghosts, wear ghost clothes. So, you know, like you need to be adaptable to your situation, right? And I mean, I might be nice, you know, talking to you because you are very nice and you're compassionate. But for the people who are aggressive, you know, I can be really aggressive too.
Yeah, it's good to be able to switch that on when you need to use that. Yeah, there were so many proverbs. I think I didn't start highlighting them until later on, but there was, I listened to the audiobook as well as the text, and I don't think I imagined this, but wasn't there one about pissing in your porridge bowl? I forget, how did that go? I can't remember.
Đừng ăn cháo đá bát. Don't eat the porridge and piss into the bowl.
Yeah.
So it's like being ungrateful. You know, if someone give you the porridge, you eat it and then you piss it into the bowl. So, you know, so if someone is ungrateful to you, you would say, đừng ăn cháo đá bát. Don't eat the porridge and piss into the bowl.
Yeah.
So that's like we use it all the time. And so, you know, sometimes when people are emotional, they just quote a proverb and that's it, end of the conversation. It's like, because that's the wisdom.
Yeah, it's the mic drop moment in modern parlance. Not to delay the next question too much, but Allie and I were in a book club last night discussing The Mountain Sing, and one of the points that came up was, oh, do we Americans have any proverbs? And one of the things that I thought of is very similar to the porridge bowl one is I always hear people say, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. So, you know, when you want to evaluate the health of a horse, you look at his teeth and you get to know how healthy or how young or how old he is. So if someone gives you a horse, you say thank you and you walk the horse away. You don't sit there and look inside and inspect the health of the horse before you accept the gift. So that's another little wise little one. I don't know where that originated. It seems very cowboy American to me. So.
Yeah, I think a very common proverb. I think it's also like used by Americans. Apples don't fall far from the tree, right? I mean, in Vietnamese we have something like con nhà tông không giống lông cũng giống cánh. So a lot of people translate it as apples don't fall far from the tree, but I translated it with the mindset that I had to capture the, you know, the image. Members relate, if not in feathers, then in wings.
That's beautiful. That's
These are all profound. I'm ready for a part or a follow-up, just a companion book for The Mountain Sing. It's just Quế Mai's Proverbs. You know, it doesn't have to be your next novel. Just sell this through Algonquin Books as just a little companion piece. Because you have one buyer right here, I can tell you that. So Allie, I think I've put off your, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I'm like really excited about Proverbs because I love Proverbs. And, you know, it took me months to translate the Proverbs, like family members don't relate, if not in feathers and then in wings. You know, it took me a long time and I needed, you know, help of my poet friends as well, you know, in translating these Proverbs. So I had the idea of, you know, making a book of Vietnamese proverbs in Vietnamese and English because they're fascinating.
Yes, agreed.
Oh, so actually, Quế Mai, last thing about proverbs. Do you have kids? You have children, right? You have.
Yes.
Did you share your love and then teach your kids proverbs as they were growing up as well? And then has that love continued on? Yeah,
I mean, you know, because proverbs are a part of every daily life, our daily life. So I teach them proverbs. Actually, I used to bring them to bed with stories that I make up myself, and then I wrote these stories down into a book in Vietnamese. It's called Những ngôi sao trên bầu trời thành phố, stars on the city, star on the city skylight. So you know, this book has a lot of stories about my childhood growing up, the legends of you know, fireflies, for example. How did fireflies come to Earth, and you know what the light signals mean, and also a lot of tales about different aspects of the Vietnamese rural life, like for example, the water well. There's like a fairy tale of heaven dropping a mirror into the earth, and it became, you know, a water well. You know, many things like that. So I you know, I weave the Vietnamese stories into that book, but I made up my own version. So it has been a lot of fun sharing those traditions with my children. And my kids are now 20 and 18, and they were the first people to read the novel because, you know, their English is better than mine, and they are still laughing at my English because, you know, I still have problems with my pronunciations, right?
Thank you,
Sounds
George.
great to me.
I think that's I'm sure we all, both Jake and I were talking about this, that you're the way you write, even like we wouldn't have known that English wasn't your first language, because the writing was just phenomenal, like in the Mountain Sing. It was very poetic, and it was just so well done. Oh, it's okay. I do have another question, actually. So you and your family have experienced war personally, from you yourself having been born and living through the end years of what the United States refers to as the Vietnam War, to running creative writing workshops for women war refugees. On the flip side and hopeful side of war is peace. What does peace mean and look like to you?
Peace is everything to me. You know, I remember when I was around 8 years old, I stood on the road of my village, and I looked at the bomb craters, at the people who had lost their arms and legs and eyes, and you know, and lost so many family members. And I told myself, the human race would not be so stupid as to wage another war. I was so sure, and you know, as a child, I was so sure there would never be another war. And it's you know, heartbreaking for me to know that there's still so many wars on earth today. You know, we keep finding reasons to start a war, and violence will only lead to more violence. So I think I really, you know, I wrote this book for the love of peace, because, you know, Vietnam is normally known, you know, to the international readers as a war, whereas we are a country of peace lovers. You know, our ancestors passed down to us so many messages of peace, and I wrote about it in the legend of the returned sword in Hanoi. There's this lake in the center of Hanoi, our capital city, where there's Hoàn Kiếm Lake, and the legend of the lake has a saying that peace is only possible if all people let go of their weapons. You know, and we have found, you know, throughout the history of the human race, we keep finding reasons to hold up our weapons, and it's not the right thing to do. And in the book, Hương also said about the color of peace. The color of peace is the color of her parents returning home. I think wars really devastate, you know, families. It devastates culture. It breaks apart. You know, it devastates nature. You know, For example, a fact which is not well known yet is that hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese still live with the consequences of Agent Orange. There were like millions gallons of Agent Orange, the poison sprayed, dumped onto Vietnam, to make leaves fall of trees so that Americans and their allies can see the communists on traveling underground. But it poisoned, that Agent Orange seep into our water, our soil, our food chain. Children have been born deformed. People have died because of cancer, and it's devastating to me that the victims of Agent Orange in Vietnam have not received any compensation from the companies who lied about the impact of Agent Orange on human beings and who reaped the profit. I'm really upset about that.
Yeah, that I think one of the things that we came up, one of the points we had in our book club last night is, and I hope this isn't too crude a point, but such a popular theme in fiction and genre is dystopian fiction, and the circumstances that the characters in this book go through and the horrors that their lives have. It does feel dystopian because your brain doesn't want to think that humanity is capable of creating these circumstances. You don't want to imagine that something like this could happen in our lifetimes, and they did. But I think it's such a wonderful balance in this book of introducing those horrors to the reader, but also having the internal dialogue that our characters like Huang and Zuet Lan have. Is it Huang who has her Laura Ingalls Wilder book, or is it, am I getting the wrong character, where she says at one point she can't imagine how a country would war with one another if we read the literature of each other. And I think that was a wonderful, I butchered that quote, but it's such a wonderful quote when you read it in your book.
I think Huang said in the novel, if everyone reads each other's literature and see into the light of our other culture, there would be no war on earth. When we start war, we dehumanize the other side. So it's easy to kill the other side, right? And the other side become the others, the inhuman. That's why, Vietnamese still are called gooks, like we were so demeaned during the war, because I have met American veterans who told me before going to Vietnam, they were told that we are unlike Americans, we have been at wars for thousands of years and we love killing each other. So, that they shouldn't worry if they had to kill us. And, yeah, so there's a lot of propaganda when it comes to wars, so that's the danger of it. And literature has a big role to play in promoting peace, because if we read literature of a group, we will see, that they are so similar to us. So, there would be more willingness to empathize, to understand, to reach out, to have dialogues. And this is very important for peace.
And I also loved, I'm sorry, my memories of the book seem so vague. I don't have my copy underlined or anything. But I think it's also Huang who she's really longing, or she's hoping that everyone who gets to have a nice, normal, sunny day of calmness and peace understands just how lucky they are to have that peace and that tranquility. And it's very powerful to weigh that against what these characters are going through. I have another question, if we can go into this. So The Mountain Sing has been out for about a year. And you mentioned earlier about some of the feedback that you got from readers, I guess, in Vietnam and also abroad. Going into this, did you fear any kind of negative feedback before it hit the audience, or any kind of censorship? And what has surprised you after hearing about the feedback from readers?
So actually, Vietnamese history is very complicated, right? I mean, I set out some really big goals when writing this novel, not just about the Vietnam War, but also the time of the French occupation, of the Japanese invasion, and historical events which are rarely discussed about in Vietnamese literature, and also in literature in English about Vietnam. For example, the Great Hunger, the land reform. So I felt a lot of pressure. I mean, I could say that I felt a lot of responsibility to honor the memories of those people who shared with me their personal stories, and I felt the burden to to do justice to the injustice they had suffered. Do justice to the injustice they had suffered. But then I was writing this book as part of my master's in creative writing, and my teacher, the great journalist, the great novelist Sarah Maitland, told me, don't underestimate the power of your inner mind. So I realized the importance of fiction in giving voices to this novel. So I used my research as a background, for me to plant a tree, which is my novel. I planted on the garden of my research, but I used my imagination, and with that imagination, I could set myself free from any fear, free from burden of expectations, because I knew, I'm an artist. As a novelist, I'm an artist first and foremost. I wanted to create a fictional world, which I think can represent the stories I heard, but it can also be, different from the stories that I heard. So actually, it was a tricky process, because I did, so many years of research went into this novel. So I had so much information. So it was tricky, to bring what I knew into the novel. And I'm just relieved that, I mean, I had, a lot of time to consider it and to read it until the moment I felt like it could be released into the world. And, with a book, you can never make everyone happy, but I think deep down inside, you feel that, you did the best that you could, then that's okay. So I have been, it has been just very emotional, to hear readers' feedback. I mean, readers from Vietnam who can read English and readers from outside Vietnam. For example, two people reconnected with their Vietnamese parents after reading my novel. They told me because of their parents' treatment of them in the past, they stopped talking to their parents. But the book helped them to reflect about the trauma experienced by their parents, and they reached out to their parents after many years. And I mean, this is the biggest gift I could hope for, because I really hope within our Vietnamese communities we see into each other's stories, and be willing to talk to each other more about our past experiences, whether we are family members or we are just strangers, but there are still a lot of unresolved feelings.
I know that my time reading this book was a time where I knew I would meet the author and be able to talk to, and the characters and just the setting is so well realized. I had to constantly remind myself that this was not an autobiography. This was a work of fiction, and I was wondering if maybe you might run into more Western readers that might get that same either impression or mistake. And I know that we said we would wait until the end to get questions from the audience. We actually have a question in chat that's really, now's probably the best time to address this because it's on point with the question we just asked. And you'll have to help me with pronunciation. Is it Tui or Tu? T-H-U-Y? Tu?
T-H-U-Y.
She asks, will this book be published in Vietnamese? And if so, do you anticipate the book being pushed back or some parts even censored from the Vietnamese government, especially about the land reform? This is one of the facts that was not taught in school when I grew up in Vietnam. We only knew it through our relatives and neighbors.
Hello, Thúy or Thủy. So her name could be Thúy or Thủy, which is both beautiful. Thank you for joining us. So I think, the topic of the land reform is a sensitive topic to talk about in Vietnam. And, work that have discussed the land reform, for example, Nguyễn Quang Lập Kiến Chuột Và Ruồi, had to be published from outside of Vietnam, even though it was written in Vietnamese. But I have been really encouraged to see recent works which have, that deals directly with the land reform. For example, Tạ Duy Anh's Đất Mồ Côi, the orphaned land. It's totally about the land reform period and the wrongdoings during that time. And the book has been allowed to be published recently in Vietnam. So I am hopeful that this book can be published without censorship in Vietnam. I mean, that would be amazing. We have a new president of the Vietnam's Writers Association, poet Nguyễn Quang Thiều, and he's very well read and he's very open-minded, and he's both the president of the Vietnam Writers Association and of the Vietnam Writers Publishing House. So this publishing house is known for publishing the most difficult subjects, including Mối Chúa by Tạ Duy Anh, the book that I just mentioned that deals with the land reform directly. So he's reading my novel at the moment in English. So I will see. At the moment, I'm trying to finish the editing of my second novel. And once this is done, I may translate The Mountain Sing into Vietnamese. I think first and foremost, I want to write for Vietnamese people, and my parents can't read English, so I would like them to read this book. I mean, I have told them what I have written in this book, but I like them to read it.
Thank you for addressing that. Thank you for your question from the audience. Allie, did you want to go ahead and go into your next question, and maybe we can answer after we only have a couple more, and then maybe we can open up to more questions from the audience. So if you're on chat, put them out there now. You'll get first in line. Allie?
Yeah, so this is my last question, and this is just kind of a trigger warning for people. It's kind of a sensitive question, so just heads up. So the mother in the mountain sing experienced wartime sexual violence. What do you think is needed for the world to take a stand against such aggression and exploitation of women? And what tools, in your opinion, would best empower women? And I ask this question because I know this is a topic that has been very much at the forefront of global consciousness pretty recently. Because I know like a few years back, a young woman, I think she was Yazidi, and then a Congolese doctor actually won the Nobel Peace Prize in regards to wartime sexual violence against women. And that was back in it was a few years ago. And I know something like this actually happened to one of the characters in the book. And it seems to be something that is at risk for a lot of women, especially during like physical conflicts or war. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind addressing that, Quế Mai, I know it's kind of a sensitive question to answer, but.
I mean, during the Vietnam War, I mean, the women, so many women were raped, right? And there was an industry that made use of women's bodies. There were so many bars set up, to serve soldiers, and women who worked in those bars were sexually violated. And I did a lot of research about that for my second novel, and I found out horrible stories. I mean, unfortunately, during peacetime, women keep experiencing, you know, sexual violation, and I think there's a lot for us to do. You know, first of all, we need the men to be involved in our campaign, you know, to stop this. And I think we need, you know, we need to empower women so that they know they are protected by laws, they are protected by the community, and they can share their stories with others, and they can speak up. And I think lawmakers, law enforcers need to do more, because a lot of complaints from women are ignored. And in Vietnam, for example, the rate of sexual harassment experienced by women is really high. But I think women are often blamed for it, you know, because like, oh, you know, you dress too sexily, or the way you behave is too inviting for the men. So they blame it on the women, whereas, you know, we are victims. So women, you know, feel ashamed. So I think there should be more forums, more movements like the Me Too movements, where, you know, influencers or women speak up, and their voices would be heard and shared and supported. And also, you know, through education and information, so that everyone involved is aware of their rights, you know, if the victims know where to complain, where to lodge a complaint, where to seek for help and their rights. And but I think I think storytelling is one form, you know, we can use to fight against sexual harassment, either against women or against men, because I think there's a lot of shame involved. And I think if we continue to share our stories, you know, we know those who are violated know they are not alone, and they are more encouraged to share their stories. But I think it's I don't know, there's still so much to be done, and you know, we need a whole event to talk about that, because that issue is very personal to me as well.
Thank you. I know it was a sensitive question, but thank you for answering that. So,
Hey, thank you. And I think, yeah, you brought up the Me Too movement. That's something that, you know, we in the United States, we like to consider ourselves, I don't know if woke is the word, or just some kind of social enlightenment. But Me Too is still so new. It's amazing that it's taken so long for people to start listening and start believing, survivors, that's taken so long for anyone to actually speak up for themselves, because they see the feedback they get when people either shame them or just meet them with skepticism or whatever else they meet them with. So a big part of the work is us as a whole, society as a whole, and men to start listening and start believing survivors. And so my next question, I guess it could be also a downer to bring up the pandemic that we are, you know, 1 year, at least it's been over a year worldwide. Rather than asking you your impressions of how the pandemic has affected your first year as a debut novelist, I was wondering if maybe you have any insights of some silver linings that this unique year has provided for you, that maybe it wouldn't have happened in any other circumstance in your lifetime.
I think here comes the Vietnamese proverb again. Trong cái rủi có cái may. Good luck hides inside bad luck. I mean, this pandemic year has been horrible. You know, first my book tour was canceled, and I mean, I spent months applying for US visa and a lot of documentations to do. And my publisher and I and my agent spent, you know, months preparing for my book tour, and then everything was canceled. So it was devastated. But I think, you know, but now this event is a blessing I received, you know, with the pandemic, you know, you know, there's this development of virtual events, and all of a sudden I could speak to people from around the world, you know, and speaking with you has been such a great experience. Thank you very much. And, you know, I've been having book clubs from, I mean, I traveled to Africa, you know, with my, you know, with this Zoom background, and talking to so many people, so many schools, universities. You know, it has been a blessing. Yes, so I think it has been difficult, but I find that people read more, maybe. And I must thank you, librarians, for your big role in keeping literature alive. When we stayed at home, you went to work, you know, you have done so much to help us cope, you know, with this pandemic. I don't know what I would have done without books. I've read so much this year. So instead of meeting my friends, you know, I became friends, you know, with the characters of books. And you know, I haven't felt lonely because there are just so many good books out there to read. My you know, TBR is like so high and so long. I keep adding titles, you know, and I wish I lived near a good library, because, you know, in Indonesia, you know, I don't have an access to an English language library, nor, I mean, I have a local bookshop that can buy copies for me, but it takes weeks for it to get here. So, you know, so if you are close to a library, yes, make use of the library. If you close to a bookshop, make good use of the bookshop, because not everyone has that luck and privilege. And I would like to thank Afterwards Books for providing a copy of The Mountain Sing today. Thank you very much. To indie booksellers, you know, who have done amazing jobs as well. Thank you all very much.
We mentioned Algonquin Books earlier. I like to just say that Stephanie at Algonquin Books has been a pleasure to work with, just as a shout out to an individual. And if anyone wants to check out algonquinbooks.com, I questioned earlier, should I even mention it? But I've gone to the website, and there's so many books that I've seen in my library that I've taken home. One is A Better Man by Michael Ian Black, who he was a big MTV guy in the 90s. And now, kind of to Ali's question, the whole book is basically a long letter to his 18-year-old son who's about to go off into the world, go off into college, and teaching him, you know, how you don't have to be consumed with toxic masculinity to be, you know, a man, to be a man in the world. So that's on Algonquin Books. I'm not done with it, but I'm very excited to read that, among others. And anyone who is watching this and hasn't read The Mountain Sing, order that today through Afterwards Books or any other indie bookstore. And so I have some questions in the comments. Let's see, I'm scrolling through. So I will also struggle with this. The spelling is K-I-E-U.
Kieu.
And they ask, can I find out about your next book?
Oh, K-I-E-U, right, Kieu? Thank you so much, Kieu, for your question. So my next novel is about children of American soldiers and Vietnamese women born and abandoned during the Vietnam War. You know, I grew up with one Con Lai. Con Lai means Amerasian or mixed children in my neighborhood, and he was very much bullied. And I joined in the bullying. I mean, I'm ashamed to admit, and I have regrets. And about 7 years ago, I read a story of an American veteran going back to Vietnam with an album of old photos looking for his ex-girlfriend and his child. And he walked the street of Saigon, you know, asking people where they knew the woman, so that because he left her when she was pregnant, so he wanted to come back to see if he needed to take care of his child. And I remember the story of the Konlai in my, you know, hometown, and I researched about them, and I found out that they were 100,000 of them born into the war, and they are the forgotten victim of the war. And I began to help them find their family members, and through my work as a journalist, and the stories was just so heartbreaking, so incredible. And so I have been writing a fictional account of a Black Vietnamese American searching for his family members. And there's a lot of racism in Vietnam against, you know, people who are Black or half Black. So I wanted to write against that in my novel. So this novel is very emotional as well. It's set in the south of Vietnam during the war and during the current day. Yeah, so I've been working on it, and you know, and I just, yeah, and it's very compelling to me as The Mountain Sing is. So I hope you will like this novel. And you know, I want to echo what Jacob said about Stephanie, you know, my publicity manager from Algonquin Books. She has been so amazing. I mean, she's my great champion. And there's so many people, you know, normally I appear on stage, but behind me, there's a team of my, you know, of my champions. And I'm really lucky to be supported by people like Betsy Clyde, you know, who's my editor at Algonquin Books. You know, when my agent Julie Stevenson submitted this book, we had interest from different editors, and Julie said, go with someone who believes strongly in your novel. And Betsy is the one who said, I want to talk to Quế Mai. She called me and talked to, before she bought the manuscript, she talked to me for more than an hour on the phone, you know. And by talking to her, you know, she used to work at People magazine, and she's very knowledgeable about Vietnam. And when I talked to her, I knew immediately that she would be the right editor for this novel. So yes, please support Algonquin Books. I mean, Algonquin has so many amazing titles that you really should read, because they're very selective of what titles to publish.
If anyone that's not watching on Facebook, Luann is the proprietor of Afterwards Books. She just commented on a link to access the paperback edition directly, and she also gave further instructions of an alternate way to order through them. I'm having a lovely conversation. Allie, I think, would agree, but I want to be respectful of your time and have this be one last question from the audience. Shane, he has a quote: "The challenges faced by Vietnamese people throughout history are as tall as the tallest mountains. If you stand too close, you won't be able to see their peaks. Once you step away from the currents of life, you will have the full view." Shane's question is, any advice on how you step away from life currents to see a fuller view of life?
I think stepping away from the currents of life is easy to say, but difficult to do. Right? Nowadays, the world around us is so noisy, especially with social media. You know, the news keep coming at us, and I think to step away from that, sometimes we need to switch off. You know, and I think a good way for me to switch off is to pick up a book, go into a quiet corner, switch off the internet, put the mobile phone away and read. And I have a laptop. Can you see my laptop?
Yeah.
That I only use for my writing. So you know, for me to write, I need to really step away, you know, from the currents of life. In the morning when I wake up, normally I don't check the email. You know, if I check email and I check social media, my mind would go crazy, you know. So I would take this laptop and go to the balcony, an area where I have no internet, and I enter into the world of my characters in the book I'm working on. you know. So I spend time, a few hours writing just by myself, you know, with my characters. And the same with reading, you know, I could pick up a book and, you know, like go to a reading corner where I'm undisturbed. And I think it's almost like meditation, you know. I think in recent years, I've learned the art of meditation, and I think it's really useful for our mind. If we meditate a few minutes each day, we will get calm and we will be able to look at different things with a deeper, the ability for deeper reflection. And yeah, because it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for answering some questions from our audience. I will say, Tui, who had a question earlier, she said she thanks you and comments your beautiful traditional dress. And she's looking forward to your next novel. I think we all are. And I guess that would be the thing. Oh, here we go. It's like a pose.
Yeah, I mean, I am wearing pants. Because, you know, sometimes people do Zoom event, they just wear the top, you know, and I'm wearing full Vietnamese áo dài. Áo dài. You have to say it, you know, really well. Áo dài means long dress. If you say áo, no, I better not say because it can be really bad.
They put that in the text, but I didn't want to try to attempt the pronunciation. So yeah, thank you to the audience. And yeah, I think maybe the silver lining is I think we might get that second novel sooner. Kind of like the Beatles, you know, they pumped out their prolific output of albums because they were always in the studio. They didn't tour quite so much. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to is our next novel from you and your companion proverb book, which I'm assuming is soon to follow. So yeah, thank you, Allie, for joining me. Did you want to say anything else, Quế Mai?
I just want to say thank you so much, Quế Mai. That it's been an honor to finally join you and talking about your book, and it's just been a joy meeting with you. So
thank you so much, Ali and Jacob, and everyone who have, you know, supported my novel. It has been an honor for me able to share my story with you, and I hope you take good care and stay safe and enjoy your reading journey. And thank you so much. Thank you, really. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều.